conference is turning around basically structures in three parts. One is about interactive matter, what it is, etc. Secondly, some samples of artistic work, how this could translate into real experience. And then third, into the project Art Republic, which is a project which emerged from his conception, and which, exactly like Eric a little bit talked about yesterday, it's something, a proposal, how to actually involve art into the political process. Interactive matter is actually what happens in between positions. You know, like in our society, our education, we learn that you have to confirm a position, you have to be a personality, become something special, to create a special position. But it's also in other things, you know, you have oppositions between cold and warm, between North and South Pole, or whatever, you have oppositions. But in between these oppositions, something happens. There is a space which actually is a creative potential, and which since the 90s I defined as interactive matter. So it's not the action itself which is interactive matter, it's kind of a static space which, in which something happens. You can describe it, it's difficult to describe, but it's easy actually to experience. That's why we make also, some exercises and stuff. And when you see the artworks, it's the same thing. You can feel much better what it really is, you know. But the thing is, you can imagine that when you don't think about you as a position and the other as a position that you have to challenge, you think, you come together, you create a space, this kind of creative potentiality space, which we can call now interactive matter. Then you have a totally other attitude, you know, like every person you meet, or every situation you meet, every opposition you have, becomes actually a creative opportunity, becomes a creative potential. And that you, of course, it's not just there, because the other party doesn't expect. She expects probably that you want to confirm a position. But that's not the idea. The idea is that you go into this creative space, you create consciously this creative space, you are aware of it, and from there you create actually with the other person. Even if she's totally against you, it doesn't matter. It's not that you have to oppose her because she opposes you. So you can think of this space and you go in it and you create, you develop a creative momentum.
Interactive matter is perceived as a multi-layered dynamic field environment in a static condition of time and volume, simultaneously zero and infinite, macro and microcosmic. Interactive matter is the totality of tension, space, rejection, and attraction emerging in the present between two or multiple objects, subjects, materials, ideas, causalities, histories, media, universes, worlds, personalities on a physical, psychological, and spiritual level as complex multi-layered potentiality. Interactive matter is the condition for progressive emergence in nature, intelligence, perception, and spirituality as such.
So if you go from this conception of where you don't care about position, then also the president of your country doesn't really have a position. It's just another figure in this game of the creation of interactive matter. In each field you can take a religious field, you can take any other field. All these fields, you know, if you think about religion, for example, each religion wants to confirm a position on the absolute. You know, it wants to confirm a way how to experience the absolute, the universal unity of all existence. But actually, if you claim that, you cannot exclude other religion. All religions has to be included if you claim to want to come to this absolute. And it's also something about our mind. You know how our mind works. We are also used to, in the mind, analytical mind, we define certain values, certain positions, and then we compare them and then we exclude. We include, exclude, exclude, include, etc. And like this we work. But it's not forceful. If you apply this idea of interactive matter, then you don't do that forcefully. You bring things together to make emerge something new, something third, something which hasn't been there. And to me, this is really creation, creativity. And if you look actually in nature, you see it completely established also. You don't have any flower which doesn't work with wind, with insects, with, which cannot grow. Nothing can develop just all by itself. And that's why this idea of making a complete exclusivity, like fascism or other things, for a certain group of people is completely futile. I mean, it will destroy itself at the end. And it's proven by history. And if you want to evolve, concerning all political issues, ecology or whatever, or, against racism or things like that, or the problems of like you from Guyana, the problems you have between Europe and the periphery of Europe, etc. All these things can be actually treated with such a method which is creative and where you can bring up new proposals.
The bare point particle cancels the infinity associated with the cloud of virtual particles. And in this way, the bare point particle is dressed by the vacuum contributions, that is, by the cloud of virtual particles. The dressed electron, the electron in drag, that is, the physical electron, is thereby renormalized, that is, made normal or finite. So, again, I'm using technical language throughout here. There's all kinds of mathematics behind this, but that's what you need to know. So, renormalization is the mathematical handling or taming of these infinities. That is, the infinities are subtracted from one another, yielding a finite answer. Mathematically speaking, this is a tour de force. Conceptually, it is a queer theorist's delight. It shows that all of matter in its essence, of course that's precisely what's being troubled here, is a massive overlaying of perversities, an infinity of infinities. To summarize, quantum field theory radically deconstructs the ontology of classical physics. The starting point ontology of particles in the void, a foundational reductionist essentialism, is undone by quantum field theory. According to quantum field theory, perversity and monstrosity lie at the core of being, or rather it is threaded through it. All touching entails an infinite alterity, so that touching the other is touching all others, including the self, and touching the self entails touching the stranger within. Even the smallest bits of matter are an unfathomable multitude. Each individual always already includes all possible interactions with itself through all possible virtual others, including those in itself that are non-contemporaneous with itself. That is, every finite being is always already threaded through with an infinite alterity, diffracted through being and time. Indeterminacy is an undoing of identity that unsettles the very foundations of non-being. Electrons, for example, are inherently chimeras, cross-species, cross-kind mixtures, made of virtual configurations, reconfigurings of disparate kinds of being dispersed across space and time, in an undoing of kind, being, becoming, absence, presence, here, now, here, there, now, then. So much for natural essence. The electron, a point particle without structure, is a patchwork of kinds sutured together in uncanny configurations, trying out new appendages made of various particle-antiparticle pairs, producing and absorbing differences of every possible kind in a radical undoing of kind as essential difference. Its identity is the undoing of identity. Its very nature is unnatural, not given, not fixed, but forever transitioning and transforming itself. Electrons rebirth themselves in their engagement with all others, not as an act of self-birthing, but in an ongoing recreating, that is an undoing of self. Electrons are always already untimely. It is not that electrons sometimes engage in such perverse explorations. These experiments in interactive transmaterial performativity are what an electron is. Ontological indeterminacy, a radical openness, an infinity of possibilities is at the core of mattering. How strange that indeterminacy and its infinite openness is the condition for the possibility of all structures in their dynamic reconfiguring stabilities and instabilities. Matter in its iterative materialization is a dynamic play of indeterminacy. Matter is never a settled matter. It is always already radically open. Closure cannot be secured when the conditions of impossibilities and lived indeterminacies are integral, not supplementary to what matter is. In an important sense, in a breathtakingly intimate sense, touching, sensing is what matter does, or rather what matter is. Matter is condensations of responses, of response ability.
Now here this is like a potential, it's like a creative potential, and you involve yourself. Actually what happens when through this kind of conception you become more responsible, because you can, you can go towards actually the other person or the other reality, you can confront the reality which you don't like, and you can go into it in a creative spirit, and you say, okay, I'm here, this situation is there, I would like this situation, so how do I, between these two positions, how do I, there's a tension between these positions, and then how do I come to this new thing, which maybe has nothing anymore to do with neither this nor that reality, but it's a new reality which you create, which is even better than what you had imagined in the beginning. About the research, it's, it doesn't mean, of course, that you have an intuitive, it's more like an intuitive way after of advancing. If you say you don't use only your analytical mind, but you use primarily this intuitive awareness of the interactive matter, that doesn't mean you exclude the analytical mind or science, etc. Science is not in opposition to art. It's like something, you see it also in history, when there are crucial moments in our evolution, art and science come together and develop. Actually, it needs a potential to, art gives a potential to science also to pass beyond the formulated borders. Like the limits of science are the rules. There are applied rules which have to be followed so that something can be recognized and confirmed as a value, as a scientific value. But at a certain moment, you have to go beyond it.
On a observé plusieurs phénomènes qui étaient contradictoires avec ce qu'on attendait. Mais ce qui était merveilleux, d'habitude, quand c'est contradictoire, c'est moins bien. Et ce qui était merveilleux, par exemple, c'est qu'on observait des températures plus froides qu'espérées. Et puis, tout d'un coup, on s'est aperçu que des barrières sautaient. Et ça, évidemment, c'est la chose la plus extraordinaire qui arrive dans une vie scientifique. C'est quand ça ne se passe pas comme prévu. Et ça, évidemment, c'est la chose la plus extraordinaire qui arrive dans une vie scientifique. C'est quand ça ne se passe pas comme prévu. Et ça, évidemment, c'est la chose la plus extraordinaire qui arrive dans une vie scientifique. C'est quand ça ne se passe pas comme prévu.
I've also published theoretical papers about this idea of interactive matter. One was published in for the Tamil Media Conference in 2017 from the Qatar, Doha, it was the Commonwealth University, and another one in Göteborg where one paper was participating in the ES4C, you know, this Information Science Conference Summit. And so one thing which is important, I think, in regards to the creative process, you know, how you involve this as an artist, is that you have somehow to split your authority, you know, in exactly what we don't do now, you know, but actually you have to create a space for the other inside of your creative process without losing actually the significance, the content of your artwork. You know, if you kind of, that's the problem when you do normally participatory artworks, is that either you leave everything free, but then it's not directed in some way, you know, it's not going to a concentrated content. But if you have a concentrated content, which basically is in each artwork there, and it's not a head content, you know, it's a existential content, then you have come somehow to lead to that. Everybody who participates or not participates is right. So whatever somebody does has to fit into the structure which leads to the content. The first project which I did really, which I opened did, was this flag project. I was in public space in Prague. It was just after the software revolution, some years later, 3-4 years later. And then I had a big flag, you know, Czech flag, 7 by 4 meters, a chair, and then I invited people to sit down and put the flag on their face and painted a kind of portrait. that this flag was destroyed. No? It gets more and more destroyed. And it's forbidden in every country. You cannot touch the flag. You know, especially I was working at the Plaza Republican Square, and then you know, so I got, after some days we got arrested. I had some people who helped me, and then but it was not bad, you know. It was just 1 hour, was some hours, and once an hour was president, so you couldn't really put an artist in prison really. So and it was the beginning of this project after developed and put flags together, and Chinese and American flag, and put portraits on it, and all this work developed in 2-3 years, and was after exposed at the UN in Geneva. The big exhibition, it was Kofi Annan came, and all this was really, and nobody, there were like 150, 200 ambassadors there, nobody protested. Only the Chinese protested because there was, I had one piece with all the flags on it, and didn't pay really good attention. There was the Taiwanese flag. So the Chinese ambassador came and said,
why
you know,
is it?
Why is it? Yeah,
it's not the country.
Yeah, so, and then in the at the UNESCO, there was this project with Israeli and Palestinian flag for the 50th anniversary of the conference of the signature of the Human Rights Declaration. So that also, there was also a little bit protest from Israelis, but otherwise. And this, each time there's a scene, you know, for example, this is about the pain of the mother. It doesn't matter who you, when you kill somebody in a war or something, who suffers? It's the mother mainly. It's this suffering of the mother towards the loss. How do you explain it? You come with your ideology and this and that, but how you solve the problem of the pain of the mother. It gives a feel already a little bit of the direction, you know, so with this idea of split authority, that you open up your authority and you create a place inside of the work for the other. You know, the significance of the work that you know, that you manifest, that's actually the superiority or the importance of the subjective awareness over a national awareness or an ordinated awareness which is represented by the flag is obvious. You know, there's something which is there. But instead of throwing buckets of blood on the flags, which never can be exposed at the UN, you do it like this, and people participate, and there were tons of discussions around the project, you know. People leave something, you know, 20 minutes, takes about 20 minutes to do this portrait. So you are under your national flag in the dark. I imagine I was never under it, but I couldn't paint this. But the thing was that, you know, it's an experience. It's also kind of maybe a meditative experience. Maybe like a face massage or something. But the thing is, you know, something happens, you make an experience and you go off. And it was also interesting, the reaction on these portraits. You know, normally I called it anyway portrait because I felt something from the person, tried to translate it instinctively to colors and rhythms, etc. with my fingers. But somehow there was a connection, and everybody would have a connection to this place, to this cloud of the face, cloud, and identify with it at the same time, you know. So that was a cool experience. Then we have the second project, that was in 2001. The Sky Over My House, it was called, and this was at the university. You know, as I said, I didn't work anymore with galleries and things like that. So this was at the university in Geneva, and organized together with the sociological department with Jean Siegel. 14 stations. So in the meantime, I started to work with dancers, to work with the whole body. So I thought the best thing is to work with dancers because they have a real conscious about, artistic work with the body. So there were 14 stations, and each stations which are objects that are still created from industrial waste. And each station represented an ideal which can only be lived subjectively, individually. So, for example, love, or justice, or transcendence, or humility, etc. It's all ideas, but actually, what is it exactly? You can only, nobody can write it's this or that. You have to feel it, or in your own way. It's a subjective way. So each dance, so we selected dancers from all parts of the world, like from all continents, etc., who created after for their chosen theme a choreography. And then we met all in 3 days before the performance. So each they worked on their object, like danced and performed. There was sound, it's a sound creation to it, which from Alain Perret, a composer from Geneva, and then they performed, they sing, and I painted their bodies. Paint on their bodies, and this painted the object. And then the objects were exposed, stayed in it was a huge hall, it's 75 meters long, 18 meters high, 50 meters large. And so for was about 1.5 hours painted, all these bodies were painted and moving, and these objects got painted. So it's that, but then there was also this interaction, if you want, or in between the media, which became more and more important. So it was not only me as an authority, another authority, because, for example, the dancer would have died, I would not tell you, you have to look like this or that, or that's the moves, and that applies the paint. So who is the painter? I painted, I put some color on the skin, but, and of course I choose the color. And I say, well, but I cannot tell after the dancer to lie down or this or that. And I told the dancer, don't think about painting. Not that it is to paint after themselves. They don't have to take my job, but I also can take their job. So it's about this with authority. You give a place to the other, but it's mutual. And so something new emerges, which is what is outwards. So what I wanted to say is this thing between the media. So there was music, dance is clear, music, dance, painting, and sculptural objects, from industrial waste, etc. So there was an interconnection between all these elements, like the sculpture, of course, determines also the movements of the dancer, etc. So, in short, you create somehow a way that this interactive matter can start to take place. That it's a conscious process. It's not just happening. It doesn't. If you just put a video together with a dancer, together with a sculpture, doesn't mean there's any interactive interdependence, or that one determines the outcome of the other, etc. And by the way, one interesting aspect also there was the audience. The audience, if you have a scene of 75 meters, and you're sitting somewhere, you don't see everything. So people started to walk around, and you could go on 6 levels and look down. I think it takes too much time if I play the video, but you can see it on my webpage. If you have time, you want to explore this further. So you can see these videos from.
Can you just show a bit? Show a bit of the video?
Yeah, I can show. I don't know. It depends.
Yeah,
I don't know where we are in time. I don't have a.
I'm interested to hear how you develop the interconnectedness between the different art forms in the process leading up to the performance.
How it was prepared?
Yeah, how did you develop this interconnectedness with the different forms?
Right, between
the dances, the paint, the
yes,
sound.
no, there was the scene, you know. I don't know if you heard it, there was the scene, you know, each station had a scene. Like I said, love, music, or anything, which is not only this subjectively. And the dancers interpreted the scene in their way. It was their creation, the choreography. But they met the object only 3 days before. They developed the project at home, you know, and they were in different countries. She was in Germany, one in New York, and another just from the Philippines, from Japan, from it was 14 different. And they met for the first time, and all this. There was no rehearsal. Only it's not possible to rehearse. So rehearse because you know you paint it. It's painted. So then we have Testament of the Wind. That was a project in Amsterdam on protest to slavery, you know, and abolition of slavery, which somehow never happened. You know, the Testament of the Wind was also performance based and painting on the stage in the theater, and people were participating. The audience was actually participating in the creation of the painting, and also dance and poetry, you know, Mexico.
Et je ne vois aucune mort. J'insiste à te dire, Koto, tu oublies vite les paroles du soir au matin, où tu confonds deviner et parler. Je t'ai dit, je suis un sorcier, après avoir été un beau guerrier. Je suis le fils de Soboxy et mon père, le fils de Bénignan, ce grand-père qui sauva notre roi et notre reine de la plus redoutable des folies, c'était lui et elle. C'est devenu une histoire, une fable. Goto. Tout de suite, la nuance, la création fondamentale, la croyance, comme la peinture sur mes vêtements colorés. La croyance, la nuance, la réputation se trahit au prix des appels de la puissance inutile qui transforme tous les droits chemins en besogne artisanale de tous les pouvoirs, comme la peinture.
And then another project is the Babel project, the reconstruction of the Tower of Babel. The reconstruction of the Babel is very simple. You take a brick, you can write on it whatever you want, and you put it in a tower or in a wall, you integrate it in a wall with all the other bricks from all the other people who already wrote something, or etc. So, and then you see that here is a wall. It's about 3,000 bricks. So far it's growing all the time, and it was traveling. So the bricks were first I started in Tent in Holland. It was exposed at Witte Museum, and then together with other ones. So I did it with a whole school, like 200 kids. And it's really extremely beautiful, all the things which happen. And you can also, when you integrate the brick, you can also read the other bricks, but you can also reconstruct it, you can change actually the structure of the bricks. They always look at it kind of a form that you have an inside and an outside. So. I moved from Europe to Biennale, and then I worked more in the Southern Hemisphere. So I created a movie, which is called Jalma, which I did in the Namibian desert. You find it also on the internet, it's got prizes in New York, etc. So I think it was in 2008 or 2009. I mean, it was in several festivals, but there was also, it was about the history, how to deal with history of, the colonialism. I'm a white man. I worked with Madame Kyoto, who was based in Africa, a model. I met her there in South Africa when I worked there. So we did this movie.
就 只有一来呀，情歌就忘不了，情歌就忘不了，美酒呀忘记了，泪都忘记了。
Klauen, klauen, stehlen, scheiße, klauen, klauen, stehlen, stehlen, scheiße, klauen. Scheiße, klauen, klauen, stehlen, klauen. Klauen, scheiße, scheiße.
Ist doch alles gut, ey. Ist doch kein Problem. Alles ist in Ordnung.
Klauen, scheiße, klauen. Scheiße, klauen, klauen, stehlen, klauen.
Ist doch alles gut, ey.
Scheiße,
Ist doch kein Problem. Alles ist in Ordnung.
klauen, scheiße, klauen.
Ist doch alles gut, ey. Ist doch kein Problem.
Klauen,
Alles ist in Ordnung.
stehlen, klauen. Scheiße,
Ist doch
klauen,
alles gut, ey.
klauen,
Ist doch kein
klauen.
Problem. Alles
Nehmen,
ist in Ordnung.
klauen, nehmen, nehmen.
Ist doch alles gut, ey. The master streams of make a little jump to 20 feet. That was project consisted. There was a room at this close to Arsenal in Venice. It was selected for the Biennale, more like all the world's futures of Korean Oslo. And so here the principle is again the same thing. There was a hammer, with people could lie on it. And there was a movie playing, with performances for money, who we filmed on Reunion Island. There's also different scenes from the movie, but the important thing is that we created inside of the movie, we knew there will be a projection of the people who lie on the hammer. So you appear in the movie, you lie on the hammer, you appear in the movie, and then you can, there were like, driftwood from the Indian Ocean, where you could play with it and play with the movie, interact with the movie in a simple way, like this. And then, what I did also, if people wanted, I painted their hands and printed on tiles. which after all this time on the side of the an installation. So it was like a deep installation into a performance of because it's a real performance of the people doing, they can perform. But it doesn't matter if, for example, you don't want to lie. You see, that's the problematic if you create a project like this, the one who doesn't participate has to be as integrated as someone who is participating. You cannot say, you participate, so it's good, and you don't participate, it's not good. No, it has to be good in all the right thing, in all the way. So there was a spot, how is it, a spotlight. So the light in the room was constantly changing. And if somebody comes in to watch the piece, he stands in front of the light, and then his shadow changes, of course, how the cameras are filming the person, the hammer, but also how you see the video, etc. So all these interactions happen without maybe the person noticing, but it happened anyway. And so subtle. So all these things interact with each other. Again, so the installation was very important. That situated with the installation, and together with the video as the lights goes through, etc. sound experiment on Copiso, which is sound sample where we do live sound. We have 4 musicians and Mami, who plays also poetry. And so we played an album with one of these.
Do you hear me? Do you hear me? Do you hear? Do you remember me? Here, remember. Do you? Do you? Do you hear? Do you remember? Kann ich nicht. Kann ich nicht. Kann ich nicht. Kann ich nicht. Kann ich. Kann. Kann. Kann ich nicht. 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 Fragments. Ekazunea. 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 Tactile. Beep beep, beep beep beep, beep beep. Tactile. I thought you were here. I thought. Madre, madre, con fa. Madre. Ekazunea, I thought. Pecco ergo sum, pecco ergo sum, pecco ergo sum, pecco ergo sum, cogito ergo sum, cogito ergo sum, ergo sum, ergo sum. I sin, therefore I am. Allô la fesse, tu seras ma jouissance.
Lundi de Pentecôte arriva plus vite que prédit. Allô, la prévision qui se hâte et qui ne se gêne guère. On n'est pas gêné par nos odeurs, nous. La tortue marchera sans relâche, point barre. Point barre. Allô, les vers de terre. Allô, la nudité qui se rend très légère. Mais je m'enfuirai encore, 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 avec toutes mes voiles. Avec toutes mes voiles. Allô, les voiliers pourchassés, le large n'est pas qu'un mythe. Les termites, vous me rendez bien service. Allô, la servitude non remerciée. Allô, la race non profanée. La pesanteur m'est lourde, l'anarchie est le mot-clé de l'humanité. L'anarchie est le mot-clé de l'humanité. L'anarchie, l'anarchie est le mot-clé de l'humanité.
And then the last one here was, as an example, is an electrostatic field where you can go inside. And actually my father was a science researcher and he discovered that when you put an organism into the electrostatic field of a certain strength, it recoils former states of the evolution. So it's kind of a memory of the whole evolution of humanity in each of your cells. So yeah, so it's amazing.
How is it we use that discussion this? How is this field? How does it do?
What does it do?
What does it do exactly to evoke this recalling of the?
Well, it's a physical reality, it's a biophysical reality. My father worked actually with bacteria and then also with plants. And for example, when you put wheat, into a field like this, it grows like 5,000 years ago. It's, for example, it's not a one stem, but it's bush. It's a bush that becomes back every year. It's another, but he worked for Novartis, what is today Novartis, but at the time it was Ciba-Geigy, and they made a work patent and blocked it because it was, they sell out Roshimi, and so it's very difficult to make it available. But my brother is also a researcher, and he works on this thing to develop more, and works with farmers. There are farmers in Europe who use it every year. They have 40% more crop for rye, for corn, etc. But it's not, it's very difficult to make it available on a large scale. But it's incredible results. You don't need pesticides or herbicides or stuff like that. all the problems can be solved. It's somehow also how the interactive matter. But so for this installation, I just created a cabin where you can go in and it's more, an artistic experience that you say, wow, I'm getting a connection between, but you don't want to come out as a monkey. Still, there's also literature about it, if you're interested about that.
What is the feeling or what is the sensation to describe?
It depends on you. We go in and we feel nothing, and then it was 1080 volt inside.
Okay.
So it's not much, but
yeah. But it's noticeable.
Yes, there are people who felt something. And then there was this performer who came, and the Manashko is her name, she's a Russian performer, and she came and she performed spontaneously. So art republic, that's what I refer to, you know, like when I started to involve actually this process now of interactive matter or interact into political process. You know, how can you actually come to create a way how to involve actually politics with such a conception, you know, of the complex thinking and of interactive matter. And so I thought what is necessary really to realize that is an expansion of the democratic institutions. So instead now we have like in a functioning democracy, you have three independent powers, you know, legislative, executive, judicative, and then I thought we need to expand it on 5 independent powers, the fourth being free flows of information, and the fifth would be art republic. And art republic consists actually of, and this you can realize immediately, you know, you don't have to wait that there are 4, everybody agrees, or this and that. It's an artistic project. And it consists of a dome tent, which is takes about 200 people inside. You know, it's like a big dome, it's painted outside like this, you know, this painting which I did concerning Great Ocean's conveyor belt. I don't know if you ever heard about it, but it's this big stream which limit actually the higher water levels of the ocean to the lower ones, and it's an exchange between cold and warm. But at the same time, it's the condition for the plankton. And the plankton is that produces oxygen. Without the plankton, we could then not exist at all. So it's a small thing, but if this is not there, we're finished. So I refer to this global, on one hand it's global interactive situation also, which is basic condition for our survival. And so this is the design around the dome. So the idea is to invite around a theme or a problem or scientists, artists who formulate in an artistic way an approach to the problem, and the concerned citizens. And, you know, and they are invited into this dome. And then you need to create, as an artist, as the artist who organizes this, or the artist group who organizes it, you have to create a kind of a partitura, a performance installation partitura. So inside of the dome, there's a transmedia situation. There's sound, you know, sound cloud if you want, which can be created, which can influence also the atmosphere in the room, etc. It's light, and there's video, where you can, video projection with internet connection. That means from outside you can intervene into what happens inside the dome. And there, the idea is that towards the problem, the idea is to create a solution. The goal is to have a solution at the end to propose to the public or to the concerned institutions, etc. You're not replacing the legislative power or the executive power. You're a new independent power. So let's say you create a solution, you propose a solution, but then it's the other powers which have to execute or which have to make the legislation that it can happen. You know. But there are scientists who are involved. You know, in politics there are always politicians, but no scientists. I mean, where are scientists? No artists. Which have solutions. I mean, then even if they propose solutions, politicians are paid by somebody else who doesn't like the idea, then he doesn't do it. So, you know, you need an institution which can formulate at any moment, anywhere, and can be involved and propose.
Art Republic invites artists, scientists, and concerned citizens into a performance and transmedia art installations core as the non-hierarchical creative environment, allowing the emergence of new imaginations and solutions for the posed social problem. Interactive matter inside of Art Republic. public, creates the condition for progressive emergence in the social body and its constitutional conditions. Art Republic is a non-representative eco-democratic academia forum constituting a new democratic independent power. It is accessible and at the disposition of all individual or collective creators who are able to create a performance core based on interactive matter. Art Republic is by its nature a nomadic and temporary institution taking place and time defined by those in need of it around the urgency of the theme or problem. There is no deliberation opposing majority and minority, but the creation of political, cultural, social and societal propositions to be submitted to the other independent democratic powers and the general public based on consensus and common sense.
How did we get stuck in a situation where these days we find it almost impossible to even imagine, let alone put into effect, other forms of social arrangements? And how stuck are we really in that respect?
My life, and I have come to recognize how absolutely essential the role of artists has been and will be for our movement. This is a period during which musicians and visual artists, poets, writers are all using their talents collectively to create more possibilities for the kinds of conversations that will bring people into movement for justice, for freedom, for equality. And let me say one more thing, which unfortunately we haven't discussed during the course of this wide-ranging conversation, and that is the power of global capitalism. And I still see that I still think that we need artists to show us the way toward a very different organization, economic, political, social organization of our worlds. And capitalism has to fall.
She says freedom is indivisible, or it is nothing at all besides sloganeering and temporary, short-sighted, and short-lived advancement for a few. Freedom is indivisible, and either we are working for freedom, or you are working for the sake of your self-interests, and I am working for mine. All right? This is solidarity. But it's a solidarity that is now attending to issues of race and class and gender and sexuality. All right? So that's how they begin to go together.
And then if you do that at several places, and next year, it will start next year in Paris, around the theme of expanded democracy, then it goes to Zurich, where it's called, Paris is called Split Horizon. In Zurich it's called Angulo After Data, and it's concerning the capitalist financial system. Then it goes to Rhode Island, it's called Realization as a State of Mind. Realization makes significance for you. And then in the fourth place is Berlin in 2024, and it's called Water Bandits. It's about water, the situation of water. Water bandits, and bandits. So you can actually, I think it could be a possibility, to use that model, in any context. I don't know, for example, for you, Ross, if this is something which could be, you just go to them and but it's this problem of how you involve it, that you put this term, it's nomadic, you can put it up wherever you want. You can invite the people you feel are concerned with, and you create a partiture. You say, you don't want that only. That it's not that the scientist is lecturing for 3 hours. You can read books and this and that, but it's creating an atmosphere, where the artistic intervention can inspire the scientist, or the intervention of the concerned citizen, the woman or who lives a reality. She can have a voice, she can talk, and they are scientists, and everybody, can again be in an interactive matter situation. You create actually between the capacity of an artist, the capacity of the scientist, and the reality of the experience of the concerned citizen, a direct contact. And this should be anyway the possibility for real solutions. I mean, solution after it's done or not done, you're not a political party, you're an artist, so it's an art project. But still, it involves into the political structure, because it's a manifestation. And when it's happening in this place, that place, this place, you can always refer to it, You take Art Republic, it's not a nation, it's the Republic, it's from the public.
Art Republic includes and refers to the knowledge of Black feminism, intersectionality, flexi-solidarity, fundamental energies for the future eco-democracy and eco-society.
History does not change because a few leaders here and there decide to take particular positions or decide to, pass bills. And of course, I'm not at all trying to minimize the importance of electing progressives and radicals to both to Congress and to local office. I'm not at all disparaging that, but what I am saying is that in order to make real lasting change, we have to do the work of building movements. It is masses of people who are responsible for historical change. It was because of the movement, the Black Freedom Movement, the mid-century Black Freedom Movement, that Black people acquired the right to vote, not because someone decided to pass a voting rights act.
First of all, one main idea, intersectionality, examines how social inequalities are organized, endure, change, and resisted. There would be no reason to have intersectionality if there were no social inequalities. So if people are just talking about intersecting identities as there's no power involved or no social inequality, I think that happens. But I also think that's moving quite far away from Ida Wells Barnett, from Angela Davis, from June Jordan, and from a long list of people who are not just African-American women, but many other women. I'm talking about Black feminism today. A second bullet, it investigates how race, class, gender, sexuality, age, ability, religion, and citizenship constitute intersecting systems of power that mutually construct one another. This is a set of ideas that says you cannot solve your problems by yourself. You can try to. You can sit around and make yourself the best you can possibly be. But you're in a structure that is going to provide opportunities and constraints on you. And that's what power is. So rather than looking at power just as a unitary thing, racial power or gender power, an intersectional framework looks at how those ideas, those systems of power, construct one another, shape one another. The way it's organized, the notion of a network social movement, right, that isn't hierarchical, that really has a different way of working, it's more flexible in relationship to the challenges that it confronts. Intersectional solidarities. How do we actually take these ideas around intersectionality and flexible solidarity and Think about what we do with them. How do they inform our questions for today? How do they facilitate democratic possibilities? How do they help us think about the moment that we're in? Sense of how there are other ways of having political solidarity that are not just all around being so worried about our identities, the communities we came from and the communities we have joined, that there are bigger principles. So I like this one up here where she says, there are times to grow our souls. Growing your soul. How's your soul doing today? That's the kind of thing she'd say. Each of us is called upon to embrace the conviction that despite the powers and principalities bent on commodifying all our human relationships, we have the power within us to create the world anew. We have the power within us to create the world anew. But the point here is that we have multiple stories that really need to develop, need to be researched, need to be internally developed so I can learn from people who are saying we have asked similar questions about how we have experienced similar social issues and how an intersectional analysis works differently for us, but it's there, and how solidarity has worked differently for us and it's there. Right? That's the space of the moment that we're in now, and I really do think that flexible solidarity gives us some space.
It was in that area that Europeans first encountered entire societies built on principles of social freedom that were still completely alien to European civilizations at the time. And Kandiaronk was very much a product of that social milieu. He was a leading figure in Wendat society at the time. He was one of the signatories in 1701 of the Great Peace of Montreal. Apart from being a warrior and a diplomat, he was clearly regarded by almost everyone who met him, Europeans and indigenous people, as simply one of the most intelligent people they'd ever met, a great thinker, a great orator. And he was routinely invited to the fort, the table of the then French governor of that part of the colonies, to engage in debates with Europeans on topics that ranged from Christianity to marriage customs, the role of money, and the whole idea of political freedoms. And many of these conversations were recorded, and in them, Kandiaronk launches a truly stinging critique of European behavior. There's a lot about women's freedoms, there's a lot about the obsession with wealth and money as forms of power. There are many observations on poverty and the kind of endemic homelessness that was apparent already then in European towns, colonial towns included. And there's a lot of discussion, a lot of criticism of the way that Europeans are constantly, on the one hand, competing with each other, but also deferring to each other on the basis of rank and status, which seems to have been a principle that was alien and absent from Iroquoian-speaking societies at the time. So if a Wendat chief wanted to engage people in some kind of collective project, there was no real way to command or coerce, so it was all really predicated on persuasion. And it was widely observed by Jesuit missionaries and others at the time that people would sit in the village plaza for long hours each day, debating and trying to convince each other and reach consensus on the issues of the time. And it's actually not contested that Europe, in the Age of Enlightenment, adopted important cultural habits from the Americas, smoking tobacco from pipes, drinking caffeinated beverages, but for some reason it never seems to occur to historians to ask if we also borrowed concepts and ideas. An example of what I was talking about in the sense of the experimental nature of human politics. When we think about hunter-gatherer societies, we tend to think of perhaps one or two basic forms of egalitarian society. Actually, what we found is that there's really a large literature on societies that some of them practiced agriculture, some didn't, that actually used to flip or alternate their social systems on a seasonal basis. One of the examples in the book, which David was referring to there, were the Plains nations of North America, which at a certain time of year, it was the time of year when the bison, the buffalo came through on their seasonal migrations, would form into a kind of society that in some respects resembles what we today would call a state. There was a police force, there were squads of soldiers who had full coercive powers. If anyone endangered the success of the hunt, they could be whipped, they could be imprisoned, they could even be killed. But the point about this, well, there's 2 points. First of all is that the individuals who occupied those roles, those coercive roles, rotated on an annual or biennial basis, so you could actually be confronting the person who you've whipped, imprisoned, punished the next year, but from the other end of the process. And the second is that these societies, with their coercive institutions, didn't last beyond the period of the hunting season and the Sundance rituals which followed. And actually for the rest of the year, these plain societies would split off into demographically smaller groups which had entirely different moral systems, and actually where coercion wasn't permitted, and people would have to resolve disputes through processes of deliberation and debate.
Different constellations of conscience and convenience are going to arise. This is a moment where there's going to be a lot of talk about coalition politics and solidarity. But what people are going to mean, a lot of them are going to mean it's convenient for us to do it. It's strategically good for us to do it. Not that we deeply know we're going to fight this fight our entire lives, even if we lose. That's conscience. Right? Intersectionality articulates with broader political and intellectual struggles for social justice. There's an ethical component to this work. We're not just doing it because we want to get jobs, right? We're doing it because it matters, because there is social justice, injustice, there's a wrong that needs to be righted.
The idea is you take one end and take the other end. Yeah? And now you just try, and I try also, to take it out of your hands. You can take the other one.
So I think once
Yes. Out. It's not only a force. No way. No way. Force. And then you can use.
Oh yeah.
You can manipulate.
You see, I don't want. It comes to that before this.
Okay, I give up.
It's not only force.
Yeah, it's also the. What a nice choreography, guys.
Feels me at least the energy to like.
That's right. So that's the artist and scientist and in the dome. No, but you also have to do something. It's to something totally new emerges. Which you never thought to this movement or that. If it's so, something beautiful comes out of it.
It's like also sports, but also art, like creativity, and it's like a bit of everything. Also a great room we have with this, like, ballet. From your point of view, you were saying before that the participatory art maybe also needs some guidance or some direction, right? But to what extent you as an artist and developing this art in public, to what extent you would be open for this construction, this idea to be adapted to different local circumstances, ideas from ITEC? How open is your method, these methods to, for instance, now you refer to the plankton problematics, but maybe in some other place this dome could illustrate. So are you in your thought process for this? It is adaptable to different scenarios.
I think to me the artwork is not the dome. It's what's happening inside, and that is and the art it's a method. The method. It's like I'm a painter. Thousands of people painted before me. So it's not. If you take the method, it doesn't mean you create your artwork inside of with this method. It's not. The method is open. It's not. And if you feel that, of course, it's very counterproductive if, for example, you write a slogan on the dome, because
question the whole dome.
That's okay to question the dome, and to make a tent like this.
Yes, because maybe it looks more space like sci-fi, and in some other places we need something more. So it can become very discursive. Why it's like this? Because it suggests, for instance, the dome suggests some sci-fi reference, right? It has this feel of very modern.
Round, the advantage it's round and it's light. I think everything is adaptable. It's the method of bringing together artists, scientists, concerned citizens into the process. And of course it's already because you will also choose the scientists you invite or the artists you invite. It's an art what you constitute, like, let's say, one of these performances with the dancers, which I think also, you have different, to compose with the different elements. But the main thing is that when you have, let's say we take the dome and with this design, if it would be always the same design, of course it becomes a symbol for something, and you connect automatically. If you do a project in Philippines, you can say, look, the same thing was in Berlin, was in Paris, etc. I mean, if you don't want to respect it, it's your own bad, like you're not up to the time, So you can use it like that, but you can also just take then if there's a connection, then to the method, to say that's the method, that's the idea of through art, strengthen the civil voice, the citizen voice.